We have a tarpy in our yard. I'll show you
All
that.
right, there we go. Oh man, that is awesome. You are in the field
Yeah.
reporting. Noah Martin, everybody, reporting from the field. All right,
Yeah, I don't know what their plan is really, but
cool. So yeah, the volume's a little quiet, so just try to talk as loud as you can. Um, and for where you're at. And
okay.
all right, so let's see. Let me just get a starting point here. Um, all right, this is Noah Martin, um, who has been a local activist in Olympia for many years with the Green Party and all kind of other activities. I'll let him introduce and tell you a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your just to catch up to where we're at.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Washington, up in the Seattle area, north of Seattle, Kenmore, um, and went to school in Ohio and lived outside the state for probably like half a decade, Ohio, Massachusetts. I was especially involved in the Democratic Party in Ohio. I worked on Dennis Kucinich's last campaign. He was not my representative. My representative was Marcy Kaptur, but they drew out his district, and he ended up running in my district. So that was sort of my crash course to electoral politics. Was watching the Democrats and the Republicans work together to defeat Dennis Kucinich. And I got, really involved in the 2016 Bernie campaign, um, starting in Massachusetts and then later in Washington. And sort of from there have moved more and more into, like more direct action, tenant organizing, um, that sort of local grassroots organizing rather than electorally. Although, I find that I have some skills in the sort of electoral field that are residual from other things. So I've applied them. I was really big in Renata Rollins' election in 2017. I was her volunteer coordinator. Um, I've helped out Helen
Thank
Wheaton's
you for
campaign.
that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Renata and I have we go back and forth sometimes in terms of tactics and things like that. But I think she's really showing up right now, and I'm really proud of her right now, just
Yeah,
in terms of
agree.
showing leadership. Um, yeah. So and yeah, and this is actually I think that sort of sets the stage. I think a lot of the way I think about what I do is setting up the environment for when things like this happen, right? Like I think that's sort of the way to think about organizing is that there are going to be, especially in a capitalist system, there are going to be crises that happen, um, and we need to build community resilience directly. I've kind of given up on sort of federal politics in the near term. Um, and I respect people like Joshua Collins who are really pushing important messages and building serious followings and using that well. Um, but I really, I guess, my own arc, from sort of federal politics to more local grassroots organizing, I think that's the way that most people need to go if we really need to, if we're really going to be able to make it through the next decade. So anyway, sorry, that was
Yeah,
kind of long, but um,
sure.
more recently, I was just showing you. We've been trying to support the protectors of the Salish Sea.
Yeah.
We were hoping to organize a fundraiser for them before this all started, but you can see we've got the executive order to raise it. So that was sort of a big focus before the COVID-19 was trying to get Dansley to declare climate emergency.
Right.
Yeah. And then I work for an organization of Quakers that lobby for criminal justice reform, economic justice, and
What's the
environmental
organization called
justice.
again?
Quaker Voice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. So, tell us a little bit about your participation in the Green Party.
Yeah. So, after Bernie conceded to Hillary Clinton in 2016, um, I, I dealt personally with here in Washington. I was up in Snohomish County at the time, and I had been canvassing for Bernie and had experienced like issues like door to door encountering people who had gotten letters with the wrong caucus location on it, like sent from the Democratic Party.
Yep.
And it was just, and that was just like one small thing in all of these just, stories from other activists I had been organizing with all over the country.
Yep.
Of just, and I should say that I wasn't necessarily surprised by it, because I had seen the lengths that the Democratic Party would go to shut down even a much smaller threat of Dennis Kucinich.
Right.
But the sort of the blatant just rigging of the process was, I mean, at some point I couldn't really justify putting my energy into anything that would help build that, or give that power. And I had voted for Joe Stein in 2012, after they screwed Dennis Kucinich, and
Right.
Obama had signed the 2012 NDAA and all this,
Yeah, me too.
just awful stuff. And so I guess it was more just, the people I met in the local. I went to like a Jill Stein. I think she appeared on CNN or something, and they did like a social. And I just really liked the people in the local party and the things that they were working on. And at the time, there really wasn't. There's a SPUSA chapter in Olympia. I should say I do firmly believe that we need an independent party, and I think that there are two key organizations. The last time that the United States was really like close to anything approaching like a revolution, it had two really key organizations that that still exist but are much smaller now. It was the IWW and the Socialist Party, and they had real power, and they had real membership, and they were very well organized. And I think one of the things in U.S. leftism that I guess you have to learn. I guess I feel like my time in the Democratic Party, I was. It's very easy to fool yourself into thinking that the left has more power in this country than it does,
Right.
because you are often given just enough concessions in the Democratic Party coalition to believe that you're pushing things. But then when push comes to shove, they can really crank the machine, and everything kind of be pushed into line by the party apparatus. And I guess what I found in the Greens was the ability to sort of shape your local and your state party in the direction that you really need it to be on the local level. I think that their approach comes out of a fair amount of experience that um, people uh, people like me coming out of the Democratic Party don't have. And I had to learn some things like very quickly that I did not understand at the beginning. So like things like um, um, cross endorsing Democrats, that sort of stuff. Like
Sorry, like
you
what?
can't like cross endorsing Democratic candidates,
Oh, right, right.
and sort of like fusion ballot stuff like that. That sort of stuff is something that we kind of attempted very early. And because of the decentralization, you can sort of uh, do that. But I think that in the long run, I ended up we basically ended up having to learn lessons that people in the Green Party already knew, you know, um, in terms of how uh, that that kind of strategy can end up, So the yeah, my time in the Green Party, I've basically been trying to I've been part of a sort of influx of people from the Bernie campaign and I guess earlier, especially like the younger people in the Green Party who firmly believe that with its ballot lines that have already been built up and its anti-capitalist platform needs to become a revolutionary socialist party that uh, can actually build a base of working people. Um, and the I think we've been largely successful. It's one of these things like, especially after my experience like trying to take over the Democratic Party, I found it
Right.
was the Green Party was kind of a pushover, in terms
Yeah,
of
no,
like
with the
it,
Democrats, it's
it,
one step forward and maybe about 20 back.
right. And it's like
Tough.
there are definitely when you run into problems, there are definitely problems in the Green Party, but they're always surmountable if you're willing to put the energy into it because the party is smaller and
Right.
the uh, yeah, there's still a whole wide range of opportunities that it can go down.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, that I'm currently a national delegate on the Green National Committee. I'm one of two for the Green Party of Washington, um, and that's sort of, I mean, that just like, yeah, it represents a larger shift nationally, just in terms of getting uh, people who are very focused on local municipalist and radical democracy, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I was involved with Green Party of South Puget Sound. Um, I think that would have been maybe like 2004 to 2006 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it was just kind of picnics in between anti-war marches and different things that we would go to, but it wasn't it wasn't too much of a political party really or a political force. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a little bit when it went around certain election times, when we were supporting Meta Hogan for mayor, there was a little bit more, and she ran as a Green. There was a little bit more organizing, but mostly it was pretty casual, and we weren't just people just wouldn't come out. We just it, it was really hard to know how to kind of grow, and especially with young people and labor organizing
Mm-hmm.
and things, and just that just wasn't really going on a local level with the Green Party, even though it was a lot of good people that were doing good work in other organizations and things around town. So, but I personally haven't been involved in the local Green Party for a number of years now, so it's good to hear that there's some kind of fresh energy and going on there. So, with the as a national delegate, I assume there would have been a national convention you would have been going to. Have you heard what's going on with that process, or?
Yeah, so it's a little bit the Greens. It's kind of funny because the Greens are. When I'm in the Greens, I feel like we're stuck in the '90s. But then I look at a lot of other like what a lot of organizations do, and I realize that we're actually somehow ahead. It's more about the American left than it does about us. but
Sure.
but we don't when we make decisions as a national committee, it's all online, and we're perpetually doing that and constantly seeking feedback from our local parties. Um, I I we do have a national convention, so I went to our national convention this past summer, but it's not as much of a decision making thing. You know, it's
Gotcha.
there's business. There's definitely business and stuff, but it's actually like just as much an educational thing. So I
Right.
don't know. We will have a presidential, and then every 4 years, the 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 national convention is sort of doubled in size for the presidential national convention, and so that's what will be happening there, and that's a separate event. You know, the presidential delegates are not the same thing as the national delegates, so that'll be decided
Hmm.
in the presidential.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So when does that happen? When is, you know, give us a
yeah.
timeline on the presidential process.
Well, so our the presidential primary is ongoing in the Green Party. It started in February, I think, late January, um, and in Washington, we we don't have we are not included on the primary ballot like the Libertarians and um, you know uh, progressives, the Freedom Socialist Party. Instead, we have to do an internal party vote, which is actually suits us fine. You know, we believe in kind of a membership baseball of party membership rather than the kind of top down PCO based thing
Hmm.
that I think is really pretty uh, predicated in people having more resources than others being able to come out on top. But
Right. It's the old system.
yeah, it's the memberless party system, you know, where people vote on the presidential nominee or something, and they declare themselves as a Democrat, but they're not really voting members. They don't have any power in the organization. We think that members should have a stake. They have responsibilities and rights as members, and one of those that's kind of the basis for our internal party democracy. Um, the presidential nomination for Washington doesn't start until May 23rd. Um, that was the date that our convention was supposed to be held, and I guess it will be held still, but it'll be online.
Right.
Um, and we will have 3 weeks after that where ballots will go out and people will be able to vote either online or via paper ballot. Um, in order to participate, if you're a new member, you have to register with the party by April 23rd. If you're a returning member, you can re-register at any time. So that's kind of the layout, and the
All right.
process
So
for it is
April
pretty
23rd is the deadline. Become a member of the Green Party of Washington State. And what's their webpage?
uh, greenpartywashington.org.
And to become a voting member, is there a dues?
Yeah, so typical dues are just $20 a year. Although you can, if you're going through economic hardship, as a lot of people probably are right now, uh, you can also sign up and waive the fee. So
Okay.
I will drop a link. here at some point.
Yeah, I will include a link in the description once
Okay,
I
cool.
eventually post this. And yeah, so and still $20 a year, very reasonable. If you can do it, I would just go ahead and do the $20 because it's a good cause. And but yeah, if not, then don't. So, but and because your participation is more important than anything.
Yeah,
So, um,
and if I can just, I mean, if you're wondering where that money goes, I mean, like
sure.
the most recent expense of the Green Party of Washington, so like half of it goes to the local and half of it goes to the state party. And the last like big expense was we donated, I think $500 to the Wet'suwet'en Legal Fund, um, and again we're hoping to do a fundraiser for the Protectors of Salish Sea. So it's just that's kind of
Well, that's
uh,
awesome.
yeah,
That just shows
um,
the priorities.
yeah. I think we're you know we when you look at successful socialist movements, especially in the Western Hemisphere, you really have to um, center uh, the um, voices and actual interests of indigenous people. So
Yeah,
that's one thing
absolutely.
that we've and that's really really big here. The most potent critics of our democratic governor, I think, are the protectors of the Salish Sea. So
Hmm.
um, just something everybody should really be plugged into. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and if you're interested in that, you can find Protectors of the Salish Sea on Facebook. So let's see. What about, let's just jump to another topic here. What are your thoughts on the situation with rent strike and, utility strike and the situation? Because in my view, and the Congress just passed this, $1,200 check, one-time check to some people. Some people are going to get it sooner if they have direct deposit with the IRS saved. Some people aren't going to see it for a month. And
right,
so it's like, okay, really, you know, there are, that's going to be a month after a lot of people get eviction notices. And a lot can happen from now to then, and they don't seem to realize the situation, the gravity of the situation, and what happens when a quarter or a third of the country gets an eviction notice on April 1st, or April
right,
3rd or 5th or whatever it is for you. I mean, they don't seem to realize you can't just like send them a check a month later and it'll be fine. Like, that's not how this works. So that's going to be, I don't know whether it's going to have to come crashing down, before something happens, or if we can put pressure on and get the rent canceled, and not just deferred
right,
evictions that just mean more bills for people later that they can't pay. So what are your
right.
thoughts on where we're at with all
Um, so yeah, I did some tenant organizing in like really in the past year. Tried to get a tenants union off the ground in the southbound area. We
that?
called
Right.
it Tenants of the Southbound. It was and it still exists. We're especially now very active. Um, but uh, I think that was a really big learning experience for me because uh, we attempted a lot of organizing around getting tenants together and organizing units. And what I'm seeing in the rent strike, I think basically there's going to be a rent strike just because, as you pointed out, people just can't pay their rent, so they won't. I mean that's so whether it's organized or not, there's going to be
Right.
some sort of
Exactly.
strike. Um, and I think from my perspective, um, the big things I learned about organizing tenants, or if we want to basically make it a method to build class power, and to actually, like you said, like get rent canceled. We need to do our best to make sure that this rent strike is organized. Um, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about how the left in the U.S. is actually it's very weak. We don't have good institutions that are ready to take on these kinds of challenges. We're just not big enough. So we got to try our level best, and
Right.
um, and to find people who are vulnerable and to help them um, scale out and organize their units. And I think the most important thing is to realize about tenant organizing is it's very unit by unit. It's very like
Yeah.
apartment by apartment building, landlord by landlord. Um, if you just start, and this is sort of what we did, if you just start even from a citywide or regional level, saying, well, we're like a union of tenants that are gonna all organize together, but we all have different landlords, and like that's not an effective strike. That doesn't work. You have to be able to act collectively within your apartment building. So what that means is
Right.
that right now, what everybody really needs to be doing is talking to their fellow tenants who share landlords with them. Um, and building. One of the things we started doing, and our biggest, the biggest, I think, example of like a successfully organized apartment that I think will do very well weathering through this already because they're organized, is the Cove, where they have a car share. you know, they've already been, they built a garden together. They've already been like doing smaller trust building things, where they really feel and understand each other as a community. I think
Oh, that's awesome.
a lot of
Where is
apartment
that?
buildings
The
are.
Cove? What side of
That's
town
in
is that on?
Olympia, downtown.
Oh, okay.
Probably, I don't know, a
Cool.
few blocks from the library. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you should bring on Jen Wolf to talk about that. But
Yeah. Cool.
or yeah,
Noted.
but um, but the so I think people, rent strike, yeah, it's going to happen. Right now, the biggest thing, people are going to have a bunch of rent due on April 1st, and some people are going to be able to pay it, and some people aren't. And I think the key thing that we need to be doing is giving people information. We're trying to put together like a how to organize a rent strike packet, of
Great.
materials, including how to find your landlord, which is doable. It's public information, um, and to find other units that they own. So if you live in a house, you should be contacting people who are in houses that your landlord also owns. If you're in an apartment building, you should be talking to people in your apartment building. That's very difficult while you're doing social distancing.
Yes.
I think it's going to require finding people's phone numbers, basically.
Yeah, it's a whole new
Or
challenge, and
adding them
I
on
wish I
Facebook.
had jumped on this whole organizing my
Yeah,
apartment building thing,
I know.
a year
Yeah,
ago or 6 months ago. That would have been handy, but unfortunately, I
right.
was a little slow on that. Besides one Bernie canvas with DSA,
Yep. And
but
that's yeah. I mean, that's really the issue. That's why we organize. Is like it's not that we're
absolutely,
gonna bring
yeah,
in. Uh, it's not that you're gonna like slowly build power. It's that when these things happen, that's when all kinds of possibilities open. And
right,
yeah, it's too bad, but it's one of those things. Like I feel like we learned some lessons doing that, and I don't want to see people who are jumping into this like rent strike. There are a lot of people getting actively involved into it right now, which is great. I just don't want them to make the same mistakes that we made. I think we really need to go unit by unit and make it be about building trust and a relationship with your neighbors, because um,
yeah,
that's the only time you ever could do that level of solidarity. You're going to trust everybody to not pay their rent, is if you've built trust doing other things. So find your neighbors, figure out what their needs are, and try and meet them immediately. Like do mutual aid of some kind.
yeah,
If you can pay your rent this month and they can't, and not everybody's on board with the rent strike, try and maybe convince people to like, okay, we all pay 50% of rent or something. And then that in itself, I know it sounds like a compromise, but like what we're gonna face is you're going to have this kind of like janky, unorganized thing on April 1st or whatever
Right.
your rent is due. But then what's really going to happen is a lot of people are just not going to pay their rent, but there'll be no evictions, and it'll build.